So it's day 3 here at ASEH 2015 in Washington, D.C., and this is a recap of some of the things that I saw and some of the things that I did today. The morning started off with a couple of roundtables. I decided to focus on roundtable events, which I think are always great at these kinds of conferences. You get to take a broad theme, and they get a panel of expert scholars on that topic to wrestle with some issues in that theme. So the first one that I went to was called Legal History and Environmental History. What can they learn from each other? And this panel featured a series of panelists: Richard Keyser, Arthur McAfee, Noga Marag Levine, Benjamin John Ponton, Christine Rosen, and Joel Tarr. So a really big panel talking about a variety of ways in which legal history and environmental history intersect. And of course the panel was brought together because there are a lot of instances of literature in legal history that has a lot of bearing on topics that are covered in environmental history. And similarly, there are a lot of topics in environmental history that have a lot of bearing on scholarship that's being done in legal history. A number of interesting points were raised in the discussion. We had an extended period for discussion, which was great, one of which was some of the limitations, pointing out the limitations of legal sources in environmental history research. And I think this is actually true for any kind of legal history research. The law itself sets a kind of framework that bounds the kinds of sources that you use, just like any sources. But Joel Tarr did point out a few things that are important. For example, when taking a look at case law relating to pollution, it's important for historians to remember that there is a large body of potential cases that never make it into the courts that are settled outside of court. And so that whole section of case law in terms of pollution may never produce a record that you can find. And he discussed some of the other kinds of sources you can go to find out what happens with cases that get settled. Another issue that came up in the discussion afterwards was how there was a question about how legal history can help environmental historians better understand the history of environmental justice. And I thought that this again picked up on that theme of the limitations of legal sources, but showed some of the advantages of applying legal history to environmental history, because if the law itself and the systems of law produce the inequities that produce environmental injustices, then studying the law may help us understand how environmental injustice is produced historically. The next panel that I went to was a well-attended panel, Histories for the Future: What Happens When Historians Try to Make History. A big roundtable again, featuring Joshua Howe, Peter Alagona, Adam Rome, Ellen Griffith Spears, and Nancy Langston. And this panel was essentially looking at a variety of examples, suggestions, and ideas for how environmental historians can become involved in socially engaged research and research that's mobilized for audiences that go beyond the academy, broader popular audiences. And again, this was a panel that had a lot of discussion. There were questions about the subject position of the historian in her or his writing. How much of ourselves should we put into our writing about the environment in the past? Nancy Langston made a really great case for why we should put more of our own personal narrative or personal advocacy into our scholarship. And I thought a point that was really striking was this question about advocacy, which is sometimes seen as a problem in environmental history, that by appearing or seeming to be an environmental advocate, we're somehow undermining our objectivity in our scholarship. And Nancy pointed out that there are environmental issues where the scholar herself simply can't be removed from the topic, because the environmental issue is so pervasive that almost everyone is an advocate. And so she pointed to examples like the study of toxic exposures and climate change, something that affects millions of people around the world and likely affects the scholar herself. We also had a discussion about what place theory can play in environmental history scholarship, and how, if you want to try and reach a more popular audience, you can integrate theory into your writing, and talked a little bit about partisanship and environmental history. So this was a really engaging panel, really well attended, and I think it's probably something that the conference will revisit in future years. The afternoon was for field trips today, and I actually didn't go on a field trip. I went on a self-guided field trip to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, and I'll just highlight one of the exhibits that I saw there that I thought was pretty great. This is a nature photography exhibit for the Winland Smith Rice International Awards in Nature Photography. And it was just a series of pretty spectacular photographs of wildlife and nature landscapes that recently won awards in this competition. Just extraordinary photographs of a series of wildlife, kangaroos, bears, and then a series of great photographs of birds. So that wrapped up my afternoon of tourism in Washington, D.C., and we're getting ready for day 4 of the conference, the final day of ASEH 2015, and I'll give you my recap after Saturday's day of sessions and a bit of a summation about the conference in its entirety.